So Trump has rolled out his reelection and anti-impeachment strategy. Donald Trump seems like he is hell-bent for leather to take us to war. And this is very concerning. And there's a bunch of news around this that I want to talk about, including a couple of things that are absolutely not being covered in American media that I think are really, really vital. But, you know, the bottom line here, in my opinion, is that Donald Trump has officially kicked off his reelection campaign. He did it just like Nixon did with Vietnam, Reagan did with Grenada, Bush 1 did with Iraq, and Bush 2 did with both Afghanistan and Iraq. In every case, they followed Margaret Thatcher's suggestion that if you want to get your popularity up so you can get yourself reelected, and it worked for Maggie Thatcher. She was in the tank after she went after the coal miners union, the largest union in the UK. And then, you know, she had her little war in the Falklands, and suddenly her popularity was over 70%. Reagan did the same thing with Grenada, and all of a sudden, oh, you saved those American students who didn't know that they needed to be saved. Bush 1, you know, they're throwing babies out of incubators. Turns out they weren't. But we've got to support our buddy, the Emir of Kuwait. And so, you know, that started the mess in Iraq. And by the way, at that point in time in Iraq, women had rights. They were doctors and lawyers and college professors and teachers and news reporters and, you know, right across the board. Now they're wearing, you know, burqas and stuff. I mean, it's insane. And Iran's influence is going to make it even worse. But every single one of them said, well, let's have a little war to get reelected. In fact, George W. Bush even bragged to his biographer, Mickey Herskowitz, back in 1999, that if he became president, he was going to have a real war with Iraq that would help him get reelected and accomplish everything he wanted. So Trump is just following this. Trump, you'll recall, in 2012 was tweeting like crazy that Obama was going to do that. But, you know, Democrats don't do that. Bill Clinton didn't do that. In fact, you could say, you know, that when he got into the whole mess with Kosovo, that he had waited way too long. But, you know, Clinton didn't have a little war to get reelected. Obama didn't have a little war to get reelected, at least to the best of my knowledge. Jimmy Carter is the only president in my lifetime not to have had any war anywhere. Maybe Dwight Eisenhower, too. But, you know, I think you could argue that Eisenhower actually was on the down low supporting some wars down south. But, you know, here it is. I think that, you know, and for Trump, this is a twofer. Not only does it give him the boost that you get from being a wartime president, which, you know, he was predicting Obama would do, but from his point of view, it's a way of punishing America for impeaching him. And he loves to punish people. And now Mitch McConnell is saying, well, we're going to pass a resolution in the Senate that says that if Nancy Pelosi doesn't give us the articles of impeachment within 25 days, by the way, it was 19 days ago that they voted on it. If she doesn't give us the articles within 25 calendar days, we don't have to consider them. There won't be a trial. Right. How's that going to work out? So, you know, is this going to work for him? You know, is this going to work for Trump? Some say no, but get ready for the rally around the flag effect. In fact, we're already seeing this in the media, and it's the media that sets us up for these things. You'll recall, you know, during the run-up to the Iraq War, Phil Donahue had the top-rated show on MSNBC, the #1 show on MSNBC, and he was talking about how we should not fight a war in Iraq. NBC fired him. Jeff Cohen, who was his executive producer at the time for that TV program, has been on this program numerous times talking about that. Bill Maher had a show on ABC, and you know, he also was saying we shouldn't be going to war, and you know, with Iraq, and he lost his show too. But here's the difference. You know, Reagan's little war with Grenada, it cost very little money, and there was no hangover. George Herbert Walker Bush's little war, his 100-hour war with Iraq, well, that set up an ongoing festering problem because of the sanctions. 500,000 children died because they forbade the importation of chlorine into Iraq because it could be used as a nerve gas or as a poison gas. Well, it's also used to purify water. So, for a decade, children in Iraq were drinking water out of the Euphrates through the public water systems that had not been chlorinated, and they were dying of dysentery. 500,000 of them. And then, of course, that set up all kinds of problems, which Junior took care of. So, this is a very, and then Junior's wars, Afghanistan and Iraq, we've been there 17 years. I mean, these are the longest wars in the history of the United States. Great for the military-industrial complex. You can bet that Trump and all his family members and buddies were all buying defense stocks. Raytheon's is up 4%. I'll get to that in a second. But, this Sunday, there were there's these 5 major talk shows, NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, and Fox, basically. Arguably on MSNBC. They featured 7 elected officials who publicly supported and voted for the Iraq War. And not a single person who voted against the Iraq War. Not one. The only person who had spoken out against the Iraq War was Chris Van Hollen. He was interviewed on Fox, but he was not a senator at the time, so he couldn't vote on it. So here we have all these guys on the Sunday shows who were all gung-ho for the Iraq War. And then, to make it even more bizarre, on Meet the Press, Jeh Johnson, who was the Secretary of Homeland Security in the Obama administration, he says that Trump has the full legal authority to assassinate Soleimani without authorization from Congress. Now, the one thing that NBC did not disclose when he was on this program, and by the way, right after he said this, the Trump campaign retweeted it. Jeh Johnson, Obama's Secretary of Homeland Security, says Trump had the total legal authority, right? But what NBC didn't disclose is that Jeh Johnson currently is on the board of directors of Lockheed Martin. He was paid $310,000 last year in cash and stock compensation. And his stock that he owns went up 4.3% on Friday after the stock, Lockheed Martin stock, even while the overall stock market was collapsing. And then, Tim Murtaugh he's the communications director for the Trump campaign. He says, Dems and the hysterical media hope this clears that up. And then he retweets, DHS Secretary Jeh Johnson debunked Democrats' claim that Congress needs to approve Soleimani strike. Now, Bush and Cheney tried to link Saddam Hussein to al-Qaeda because the authorization to use military force from 2002 says that, or maybe it was 2001, says that the president can make decisions without consulting Congress. He has to tell Congress within a certain number of days, but he doesn't have to consult them in advance, that have to do with anything surrounding 9/11, basically. And so Cheney says, well, using that authorization for military force, we can invade Iraq because back in 2001, there was a senior Iraqi intelligence official who met in I think it was Prague with some guy from al-Qaeda. Well, that ended up getting debunked. It had, the reality was that Saddam Hussein was actually actively killing al-Qaeda people because he saw them as terrorists. He opposed al-Qaeda. He was running a secular government in Iraq. Al-Qaeda wanted a religious government, which, by the way, is what you have now. So then, Friday night, Mike Pence, reliable toady, does the same thing. He says, assisted in the clandestine travel to Afghanistan of 10 of the 12 terrorists who carried out the September 11 terrorist attacks in the United States. Right, Soleimani, he's saying. There's actually no evidence of this. The 9/11 Commission report says nothing. Soleimani's name does not appear anywhere in it. And it unequivocally says, quote, there is no evidence Iran was involved in 9/11. Now, yeah, some of the hijackers traveled through Iran, which is what Pence was saying. But that was long before the plot was organized. This was back when they were just guys. Of course, it was Mike Pence who, on the floor of the House of Representatives in 2004, said, and I quote, weapons of mass destruction have been found. By the way, you'll find a great summary of this over in Judd Legum's newsletter at popular.info. And it turns out that Trump was given multiple options. So do you think that Trump's reelection strategy and his anti-impeachment strategy is going to work? Or is this going to backfire on him? It looks so far, particularly given that the Sunday shows all had basically gung-ho for war types of people. Yeah, they were talking about, well, maybe we need to be more careful, and I'm not sure this is a great idea. But and then Jeh Johnson working for Lockheed Martin saying, oh, yeah, this would be a great idea. Is this going to work? What do you think?